Have you ever wondered why your 4.7 V8 powered 4Runner is making a ticking sound like this? Well, it's actually a symptom of a pretty expensive problem. So today I'm going to share with you what that problem is, how to fix it, including one way that lasts forever, and what happens if you just choose to ignore it rather than fixing it. I'm Tim, and 8 years ago I purchased this 4Runner with, you guessed it, the exact same issue that we're talking about today. We're talking about cracked exhaust manifolds today, folks, and it plagues any Toyota or Lexus that came with the 2UZ FE 4.7 liter V8 engine. That includes the 4th generation 4Runner, the 100 series Land Cruiser, the 1st generation Tundra, the early 2nd generation Tundras, the 1st gen Sequoias, the Lexus GX and LX 470. There's a whole bunch of Toyota trucks that came with this engine. Did I miss any? And just like their decision to put strung out small turbocharged engines in their new trucks, Toyota is kind of only partly to blame for this, because surprise, surprise, the real driver behind all of these decisions and this bad design was emissions regulations. Yay! The reason Toyota used this design in the first place was to lower emissions readings during cold starts. Now, the 4.7 manifolds are a tubular design made out of thin steel. So in order to reach the desired readings, they had to move the catalytic converters as close up to the head as possible so that the heat would spread down to them and warm them up and get them working as soon as possible. It makes sense, right? Well, the problem is that meant making the manifold and the catalytic converter into a one-piece design. So the combination of the thin metal with the excess weight of the catalytic converter hanging off that same flange is what causes the cracks in your manifold. And as far as I'm concerned, especially when it comes to these V8 4Runners, there's two different types of 4Runners. Ones that have already had cracked manifolds and ones that are going to have cracked manifolds. Eventually it's going to plague all of them. And yeah, there's some of them that are up there in mileage and people are bragging saying, I'm still on the original manifold, that's awesome, I'm happy for you. But you should probably start storing away some money for some new manifolds or headers for the future. So how do you know if you have a cracked exhaust manifold? Well, the most common symptom is a loud ticking noise coming from your engine bay while you're driving. This ticking sound is going to speed up and slow down with the revs of the engine, and it might even get louder when you put more load on it, like if you're climbing a hill. And it'll also probably go away when the engine gets warmer. And the reason why the sound goes away once the engine heats up is because metal expands with heat, right? So if the crack is open when the engine is cold, then it's allowing the exhaust gases to leak out. And then as it warms up, the metal expands and it seals up the leak then. Now, if your ticking sound remains even once the engine is warmed up, like mine did, that means that you have a larger leak. And it basically, even once the metal has expanded with heat, the crack is still large enough to still cause a leak. So you really have 4 different ways to fix cracked exhaust manifolds on your V8 4Runner. The first one is to just simply weld up the crack on your existing manifold, or do one of those like YouTube fixes where you just kind of wipe some snot on there or JB Weld and hope for the best. Let's dive into the pros and cons of each of these options. Should we give them a pros and cons list of each one? I think that's a good idea. So the pros for this are, well, kind of short. First of all, it's the cheapest option by far. It'll cost you like next to nothing. And honestly, it might actually work temporarily. It might buy you some time. The con list, of course, is quite a bit longer, and in order to do it right, realistically, to prep the manifold and everything and weld it properly, you're going to have to remove it off of the engine, and that's kind of the whole problem here, is this is a very labor-intensive job to get the manifolds off of a V8 that is stuffed into a mid-sized SUV. There's not a whole lot of room to work in there, so if you have to take it off, then to just do a little patch job fix and put it back on and do all of that work for a fix that might not work, it's just a tough sell. So as Mobb Deep once taught us, there ain't no such thing as halfway crooks. So you either fix the problem or you didn't fix the problem. That kind of applies here, right? I don't know. Number 2, and probably the most common, is to just buy new OEM Toyota manifolds from the dealership. Now this is by far the most expensive way to fix this problem. I personally was quoted over $2,000 Canadian for one side. That's one manifold, plus all the hardware and everything you need to actually do the job. So it adds up quick, right? That's the price for one side, and chances are you're probably gonna wanna do both, so you can double that. And then you're looking at least, I think the book says 7+ hours of labor per side. If you're thinking maybe $100 plus an hour shop labor. Now, normally a big selling point would be that you're putting OEM authentic Toyota parts on your vehicle, that you can feel peace of mind knowing that it's like the best of the best. But this is one of those rare cases where it's just not really true, and the Toyota design is a bad design and it's going to fail again in the future. So to spend thousands of dollars to put new Toyota manifolds back on your 4Runner, knowing that it won't happen immediately, but down the road, a couple 100,000 kilometers later, you're gonna be back here again. You're gonna be buying new manifolds again. That makes it maybe not the best option after all. So for the pros, you are getting OEM quality parts directly from Toyota. And you also have the ability to get them installed at a Toyota dealership by a Toyota tech, if you're into that sort of thing. And now for the cons, well, they're really expensive. And they're just gonna fail again eventually anyways. It's just a bad design. Toyota didn't update these over the years or anything and change the way that they're built, knowing that they fail. You still get the same design that came on the truck originally. You also are spending thousands of dollars just to keep your 4Runner the same. Looks the same, sounds the same, performs the same. You don't get any improved fuel economy. You don't get any more performance. It's just thousands of dollars out of your pocket, and then the ticking noise is gone, and that's all that you benefit from it. The third way of fixing this is to just buy OEM style manifolds, like from the parts store or something. I'm sure there's some made in China knockoffs of the original Toyota manifolds that you can find for much cheaper online or at your local parts guy, you know. But I personally wouldn't take the gamble, because realistically, what are the chances that the cheaper made in China version of an authentic Toyota part is going to be better quality and better built and last longer? Because, you know, typically the Toyota one is the best, and then they cut costs to try and make a cheaper version. That's just not going to be the case. You're not going to get more for less, at least not this time. Which leads us to our fourth, and in my opinion, by far best way to fix cracked exhaust manifolds on your 4Runner. Upgrade to Doug Thorley short tube or long tube stainless headers. Wait a minute, did this just become a product review video? You're friggin' right it did, bud. I'm telling you, by far the best way to replace those dirty, nasty, cracked exhaust manifolds on your 4Runner is with a beautiful, shiny new set of Doug Thorley headers. At least they're shiny when you first put them on, but more on that in a minute. That's how I fixed my own 4Runner, and still to this day, I feel like it's one of the best mods I've ever done to it. So obviously I can't really give you a tutorial on how to install these headers on your 4Runner because, well, they're already on. But the good news is that unlike a typical installation video, I have the ability to share a really long-term review with you of what my experience has been like owning them. And as a matter of fact, I've put over 60,000 kilometers on this pair, which is like, what, 40,000 American Freedom gallons? Enigma Engineering actually did a really good tutorial on how to install these headers on his 4Runner, so I'll link that video down below for you to check that one out. So pros and cons for the Doug Thorley headers. Well, starting with the pros, the first thing is that these are by far the best value. You can get a pair of these for less than the price of one single manifold from Toyota. That seems like a no-brainer alone in itself, right? These also have a lifetime warranty on them, and they're made out of T304 stainless steel. You also obviously get increased horsepower and torque, right? This is technically a performance modification that we're doing for reliability, right? So you're gonna see 30 horsepower and 30 pound-feet of torque, but there's a big asterisk here. That's in the mid-range. That's not peak horsepower, right? So you're not gonna put these headers on your 4Runner and it's all of a sudden gonna start making 300 horsepower. I think the peak numbers, as far as I remember, are like 11 horsepower and 18 pound-feet of torque or something like that. That's how much you actually gain in peak numbers. But it changes the shape of the dyno graph. So the area under the curve is much bigger with these headers installed on your V8. You'll also see an improvement in fuel economy with these headers, which is definitely appreciated. These things are not exactly fuel efficient from the factory. So we'll take that. We'll take any gains we can get. Me personally, I saw about 2 miles per gallon increase. I think I technically lost about 3 miles per gallon with the lift and wheels and tires. But then I gained 2 miles per gallon with the headers, so again, I'm not quite even Steven, but I'll take it. Now, if you go with the short tube headers like I did, a big benefit is that you get to maintain your factory catalytic converters. So they come with no flange on the end of them. They're designed for you to chop your original cats off and then weld them onto the end of the new headers. And the reason for doing this, and the reason why I liked the short tubes better than the long tubes, is that means you can still pass emissions testing, no problem. We don't do that here in Ontario anymore, which is awesome, thank you. But it's definitely something to consider if you do live in a state or a province that cares about the emissions of your vehicle and is kind of keeping checks on you. Also, you don't have to worry about check engine lights. I've never had any check engine lights related to these headers ever since I've installed them. It's been, what, 8 years now? You don't have to worry about that. Now with the long tubes, when you're deleting the catalytic converters, you're gonna have to deal with like O2 simulators and stuff like that. And I do see people complaining about having troubles with those sometimes. It's a little bit more of a complicated install. You gotta do some wiring and stuff potentially. Essentially, you have to trick the ECU into believing that the cats are still there, even though they're not. With the short tube headers, you don't have to worry about that. You're just replacing the manifold itself, which is the problem, with the headers and keeping the emissions and the rest of the exhaust system all completely intact. Now for the cons, and I'm not gonna lie to you guys, there's pros and cons to every one of the options on this list. And there are some cons with the Doug Thorley headers. The first one, probably the biggest one, is the availability. I get so many questions and comments and emails and DMs of people saying, where the heck can I get those Doug Thorley headers? And honestly, I don't know. Jason Bertman from Bertman Industries, he played a big role in getting these built by Doug Thorley in the first place. He's on the forums and everything. He's a well-known guy. He was always the biggest seller of these as far as I know. I've had some people come to me claiming that they've had some kind of less than stellar experiences there recently. I've only talked to him a couple of times myself. I haven't done business with him, but he seems like a great guy. It's hard for me to vouch for him because I haven't actually worked with him. But he was always the go-to, and I don't know if he still is now. You're going to want to do your own research on that. I used to be able to link to Amazon for people even to buy them on Amazon, and I think they're kind of always out of stock now. So I would maybe even reach out to Doug Thorley directly and see if either they will sell you a set themselves or if they can point you in the direction of a good supplier that has them in stock that can help you out with that. Now, the quality of the welds on the flange on one of my specific headers, I'll be totally honest with you, it was dog crap. I don't know what they were thinking letting this leave the factory, but I had a friend of mine who's a hardcore drag racer and a licensed tech. He took a really good look at them and he said that it's not going to affect the structural rigidity of them and it's not going to affect the flow for performance either. They're just ugly. But I'll throw a picture on the screen to show you what I'm talking about. There is no question that my passenger side header was built on a Friday. Seems to be holding up fine though so far, so I can't really complain too much, but it's worth noting. There was a bit of a controversy on the 4Runner forums where, some owners came forward with the fact that their headers had been staining and rusting, and they're saying they're supposed to be stainless, why do they look like crap? And so the issue here is that, especially with these later model 4th gens that have the secondary air injection system, they have a separate tube that runs across the top of the manifold or the header. And with the Doug Thorley headers, that tube was not actually made out of stainless steel. The rest of the headers were made out of stainless steel, but that tube wasn't. And so it's not really shocking that over some time, the tube rusted and corroded and looked like crap. And so initially, the owner reached out to Doug Thorley and they weren't going to warranty it. And so that was a big problem. So then he went public, went back and forth. Long story short, they now not only cover that under warranty and will give you a new pair if yours rust out, but they also changed the way that they made them from that point forward, and now the newer headers actually are fully stainless with that tube and the header itself. Now, if you're a huge fan of drama and you're all caught up on the current season of Love is Blind, I'll go ahead and throw a link down in the description for you to check out that forum thread. Now let's take a look at how my headers are holding up, shall we? Do we have like the angelic reveal music? We don't have that sound effect? As you can see, I've definitely got some staining. My secondary air injection tube is looking a little bit crustier than the rest. A lot of bit crustier, really. The ceramic coating on the Doug Thorley headers, though, is holding up, I would say, decently. It's kind of hard to tell from this angle. You can only see so much, guys, but I haven't had any leaks or anything on mine. They seem to be holding up pretty well. And obviously, as you can see by the rust on all these nuts, I live in Ontario, which has a lot of road salt in the wintertime, so if they're gonna rust, they're gonna rust on this thing. I can promise you that. And remember, guys, that's over 60,000 kilometers and 8 years of use. So these are not just like a few weeks old or something. I've been putting these things through the ringer. They've been on this truck for a long time. So whether you choose to just put Toyota manifolds back on your 4Runner or you upgrade to Doug Thorley headers, either way, the install is going to be very time consuming and difficult regardless. Remember, Toyota basically shoehorned a V8 into a small SUV, so that means you got to shoehorn parts back out when you have to work on it. I actually had a friend of mine install my headers, so I'm actually not much help in terms of telling you how much money to set aside for an install. But I do want to help you guys out. So what I did was I posted a poll in the larger 4Runner Facebook owners group to see sort of what everybody paid for their install, anybody that has Doug Thorley headers on their truck. Now, what about the sound difference? I think this is a big common misconception that simply putting these headers on your V8 is going to make it sound different. And my initial setup was just with the headers. Like I only replaced the factory manifolds with the headers, and I retained the factory cats, the factory Y pipe, and then the complete factory exhaust system. And I can tell you based on my experience that it didn't change the sound whatsoever. There's no difference. It sounded exactly like a stock 4Runner. Then I added the Gibson catback exhaust to mine, and now it sounds like this. So the combination of the headers with a catback exhaust definitely sounds really nice. It gives it a really deep growl. I'm still running the factory Y pipe and still running all the factory cats and everything on mine, but you can get an aftermarket Y pipe for yours if you wanted to free up the exhaust system a little bit more. Performance-wise, these definitely woke up the V8 in my 4Runner substantially. I felt it the most when I was towing a camper trailer through the Rocky Mountains, up steep highways and stuff. It was like a night and day difference. You could just tell that the V8 was breathing so much more efficiently. Towing was effortless with tons of power in the mid-range. I even had to hit the brakes to go around some corners on uphill climbs. This thing was a beast at towing a medium-sized camper trailer. The stock manifolds in comparison really made it feel like it was being choked out in the mid-range, and so this eliminated all of that. And I feel like if you were to combine this with an ECU tune and actually, optimize the tune on your computer to make up for this added airflow, you could probably see even more performance improvements. But it's also worth noting, actually, I should mention that you don't need to tune your ECU after you put these headers on. I think some people are asking that question, and you don't need to. I haven't tuned mine. I've been running it for 8 years, runs flawlessly. So we've determined, obviously, that this is a pretty expensive problem to fix. It's a kind of a stinky job to do. People don't really want to do this one. What happens if you just ignore it and don't fix it? Just leave it alone? Well, I've got good news for you. As far as harm to the engine, a cracked exhaust manifold, at least on these V8 4Runners, is more embarrassing than it is like a catastrophic failure. In most cases, it won't even be a big enough exhaust leak to trigger a check engine light. I think it's safe to say that this is the most common issue with these 2UZ V8 engines, and I don't really consider it a reliability issue though, because realistically, it's never going to leave you stranded on the side of the road. The annoying ticking sound might make you want to walk home, but the 4Runner at least won't make that choice for you. Now, it's probably not a good idea to drive for a really long period of time with cracked exhaust manifolds, but rest assured, you don't exactly have to call in sick the very moment that you notice your 4Runner starts ticking in the morning. It's not really that serious. These V8 4Runners are unique beasts, and understanding cracked exhaust manifolds is only one of the things that you need to know about them. So watch this video next for a whole list of other interesting V8 4Runner facts.